Dice from the Vermont Agency of Education, and I present to you your Unit 1 judges.
Please be seated. I'm Bob Shadler. I'll be the chief judge for this session. I live and work in Washington, D.C., working on a book with the Johns Hopkins professor on the little tigers of East Asia and senior fellow at the American Foreign Policy Council.
Sorry. I'm Andrew Murphy. I teach political science at Rutgers University in New Jersey, and later this afternoon I will be stopping at the Biden Travel Plaza in Delaware, where I always get coffee and gas as I'm heading up the road.
My name is Christopher Riano. I'm a professor of constitutional law and government at Columbia University and assistant counsel to the governor of the state of New York.
And who are you?
Hi, my name is Hasna Parker. I'm the captain of Unit 1, as well as a sophomore at Smyrna High School. Our coach is Ms. Alexitch, and these are my teammates.
My name is Skylar Gonzalez, and I'm a sophomore at Smyrna High School.
My name is Melissa Perez, and I'm a junior at Smyrna High School.
My name is Micah Matthews, and I'm a junior at Smyrna High School.
Okay, we can get started. Just to remind you that sometimes the air conditioner goes on and people have traveled from Delaware who want to hear you, as well as the judges want to hear you. So use your projecting voice so we can all hear. The question for today is question 2. Our system of government is based on both natural rights philosophy and classical republicanism. Which philosophy, if any, has predominated in American political thought, and what has been the benefits and costs of this predominance? What examples of contemporary issues can you describe that reflect the tension between classical Republican ideas and those of natural rights philosophy? What position would you take on which of the philosophies, if either, should prevail? Explain your principles and values that underline your position. Please begin.
Classical republicanism is the more dominant force in American life, despite natural rights being built into our foundation. We experienced the civil rights movement in the 1950s and 60s, in which African Americans protested and demanded equal treatment. Similarly, the Me Too movement showcased both genders speaking out on prior devastations. In both instances, there was no one leader, but all individuals felt inclined to join as they connected and were willing to stand up for those who needed it. Although it may seem that natural rights philosophy is a more dominant force, classical republicanism urges others to use community over individual. Another example of unity for the prosperity of others is the protection against immigration enforcement and their inhumane treatment of aliens. In 2018, the U.S. government built camps along the Mexican-American border where families have been separated and some have even died. People found this to be inhumane and cruel, resulting in individuals using their right to protest outside the campsites. We are fueled by our morals and beliefs that everyone has the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but ultimately, we come together to ensure that anyone can experience the same rights that we do. Like most things, though, there are benefits and costs to this predominance.
Classical republicanism is not a dominant force in America because people are driven by selfishness. Congress, per Article 1 of the Constitution, created legislation for the country to protect us as individuals. Natural rights creates the mindset that someone's beliefs are held to a higher extent than others. In 2015, the Charleston church was violently attacked when 21-year-old Dylan Roof murdered 9 African Americans during prayer service. Roof described his crime as political and declared to be a white supremacist. He had an opinion and acted upon it, and that's when his natural rights of liberty became a threat to the community. On July 4th of last year, Patricia O used her natural rights to protest a decision against families being separated at the border. In spite of Trump's zero-tolerance immigration policy, she scaled the Statue of Liberty and used her First Amendment right to speak out against socially accepted norms. The natural rights philosophy becomes dangerous when people go to extremes to make their opinion known. In these examples, we can see the tensions between the dominant forces in our country today.
My liberty ends where yours begins depicts the relationship between classical republicanism and the natural rights philosophy. Both of these philosophies go hand in hand to create a balance of individual and community rights. Occasionally, the balance between these rights is offset, causing turmoil. We see this with the Second Amendment being questioned in our current climate, with individuals getting access to guns too easily, resulting in high-level cost. Our individual rights are now affecting the rights of the community in a negative way, giving way to numerous cases of gun violence. such as the school shootings at Stoneman Douglas High in 2017 and the daunting Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting in 2012, causing us to question whether individuals' right to bear arms should be superior to others' rights to life. The death penalty is another example of the tension between the two. The argument being, should your right to life, liberty, and happiness be taken away when you are considered a threat to the community? As seen with Ted Bundy. The community cannot exist without the individual, but the individual cannot thrive without the community. The tension between both ideologies could lead to a perilous ending if one begins to become more paramount than the other.
The natural rights philosophy should prevail over classical republicanism. Natural rights is derived from what life would be like in a state of nature and without government. As John Locke states, all men are equal and naturally live without being subjected to the will of authority of any other man. John Locke philosophized one should have their inalienable rights of life, liberty, and property, or more presently known as the pursuit of happiness, and allow the people to live life as they would in a state of nature, rather than promoting the community as under classical republicanism. The purpose of a government is to preserve and protect one's inalienable rights and not limit the people's freedom, and should only be done so under the consent of the governed. A person is naturally motivated by one's own self-interest and not civic virtue, and their authority should promote this. Natural rights allows people to live freely as they would in a state of nature and creates a functioning society, and is best for the people, for they are achieving things for themselves and not others.
Okay, perfectly timed. But as good as that presentation was, we still have questions. I would like some response with regard to natural rights with 4 concepts. Natural versus artificial, discovering versus inventing. Columbus discovered the Americas. Charles Edison invented something that didn't exist before, such as the light bulb. So are natural rights in opposition to artificial rights? Are natural rights something we discover or something we invent?
John Locke created the natural rights philosophy, and his philosophy was a state of nature. So I believe it is something that we did not invent, but something that's always there. So it's rights that we should have when there's no government.
Are we still discovering those rights then, as time goes on?
I think as people are becoming more modern, like they didn't allow same-sex marriage. So I believe that everyone should have the right to be with who they want to be. So we're discovering, but that's liberty though, that's your freedom. So I think it's all in the same category, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness.
So right to life. Some people are debating this even now, and we haven't fully figured it out.
I would like to disagree with Hasana because I believe those rights are invented. We don't earn the liberty of being here, liberty, happiness, anything, because we were basically forced here.
Okay.
Say more about that.
Yeah.
New York abortion law. Now it's up to 39 weeks that they could get an abortion, and understandable, let's say the child or the mother could end up sick. However, I don't believe that they should be allowed to harm the child once it has a heartbeat.
So does
Or-
this, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh.
So does this, because this makes me think about sort of the contemporary partisan politics that we live with. Does this natural rights and classical republicanism map onto Democratic and Republican parties, or not? Is that-
I believe it does, definitely. I feel like people of different parties tend to believe this, they believe that they should believe what their party believes. Does that make sense? Thank you.
And like the natural rights is more towards republicanism.
That's what I was asking, okay.
And classical republicanism is more towards Democrats.
I think the natural rights philosophy definitely goes towards the Republican view, being that they're strong on, or they're anti-abortion rights and they're strong on their gun laws and they want their freedoms and they argue for freedoms.
But couldn't we probably map on both philosophies onto either party depending on what the party is looking to achieve? So in some ways, the political aspect doesn't matter too much. It's the philosophies themselves that are then used depending on what the parties are thinking. Right? I mean, fundamentally, there are core tenets of natural rights philosophy that either party might want to use at a certain time. right? For political gain.
Yeah,
Go
but
ahead.
we have to agree that Republicans themselves, they despise the thought of abortion, and that's unique to their party. Liberals think it's up to the woman, up to the mother to choose whether she can abort her child. So I believe that certain beliefs are unique to each party, because you're not going to hear a liberal say, "Oh, I'm kind of anti-choice." Usually, maybe you might hear that, but most of the time it's Republicans who say, "No, we're pro-life," and that's for Republicans, if that makes sense.
And also to your point, that's why we have natural rights and classical republicanism in our society. We don't just choose one or the other.
And to add on to your earlier question, when you were asking whether natural rights was discovered or if it's being invented, I think as time goes on and America is allowing more freedoms for minorities, it's becoming more, we're discovering these freedoms and these natural rights more and more as America becomes more equal, and now America is more equal more free than it's ever been, and as our
Who gets to decide who's a minority?
minority is the lesser of the population, or people who aren't represented as much.
Okay, my parents both came from Austria. Is there an Austrian minority, Austro-American minority?
I mean, I've never really met an Austrian American, so there must be a minority.
Now you have. I heard two different things in your opening statement. One was that natural rights can be dangerous, that they take it to an extreme, and the other one was that natural rights should prevail. It came back towards the end there. So I'm thinking of something like the Second Amendment. Would we be better off as a society if we just repealed the Second Amendment?
We wouldn't be better, because we already, to target a certain group, the South, they love their guns, to say it in simpler terms. And if we were to take that, the amount of chaos that would cause, it would literally separate us once again, just like the Civil War.
But we've repealed amendments before.
Yeah, but that one is so important to us. When we were fighting the British, what were we using? Guns, right? And that amendment.
You finish yourself.
You guys, we're listening. Keep going.
That amendment gave us the rights to create our militias, to protect ourselves, our families, using those guns. Getting rid of that would be like getting rid of something important from history. So we shouldn't get rid of the Second Amendment, because it's such a huge part of our history.
And that's also protecting our natural rights, protecting us against the government.
Okay, very good. I can tell already that you'll be thinking and discussing this long after our time here is over, because you already wanted to do that. Wonderful, because that's what being a citizen is all about, is trying to discuss it in a way that not only convinces ourselves, but helps other people see what you're trying to say. So it was a nice mix of views. I think it also took some courage to come out and state things that are still delicate in our common good efforts to figure things out. So right to life, liberty, and property, or happiness, is still stuff that we're trying to discuss. It's not pre-cooked in a cookie cutter that we just hand to the next generation. We have to figure it out and discuss it, debate it, sometimes with some acrimony, sometimes with hopefully a lot of goodwill and tolerance. So a nice job. I'm glad you're here at this August competition, and good luck into the future.
How do you all feel?
Very great.
That's what, I love that, right? I'm so glad you said that, because so often people are like, I like hearing great. I'm so thrilled to hear that. And how do you feel you did?
Great.
Good. Yeah, that's what I like. That's good. See, there is something, we've actually talked about this before, about having a presence that makes you come across even better, and each of you had a presence. I thought that was incredible. One of the things that I saw that made me really, really proud to watch and sit here was the debate and dialogue that you each had with each other. I always try to actually foster that in my classroom because I think one of the most important things that we can do is to celebrate the First Amendment, which is the right of free speech, which means both the right to say one's thoughts, but also the right to debate and dialogue with others to hear their thoughts and to be open to the fact that we don't all agree on things. And there is a reason that that amendment is first, and it is for that reason. And I'm going to assume that because you're all highly educated, you're probably going to be finishing up with high school, junior, senior year, going to college, which is going to be the time where you debate and dialogue these things probably more than any other time. And I think you're all very well prepared. I was very impressed with your answers. I thought that each of you did a good job when you answered individually. I thought that your presentation at the beginning was well done. You should be very proud of yourselves today.
Let me just echo what my colleague said. People take the opening statement in a lot of different ways. We've now heard 15 or 18 or 100 of them. I've kind of lost count. Different teams do this differently. Some of them stay in the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries. You took us right to contemporary issues, I think, in the first minute of the discussion, and that kept throughout our questioning as well. And that's different than some of the other groups. You weren't just throwing Supreme Court decisions at us that I'd never heard of. You actually were really talking about very contentious issues and connecting them to these kind of foundational issues. So really nicely done. And you had, this group had sort of what's the word I'm looking for? You were punchy in a good way.
Yeah.
Or sassy.
Yeah.
Sassy. Well, I don't know if that could be misconstrued. I didn't want to say anything. So yes, but you came back at us.
I like that.
Can I ask you a question?
What's that?
Right, the natural rights philosophy isn't actually in the Constitution. It says
Ah,
nowhere
yes.
that we have the right to life, liberty, to practice.
That's the
So why do
Declaration.
we think we do have it?
Where do you think you might find it?
Declaration
The
is
Declaration.
I would say probably there. Where else might you find it? And then I'm going to let you take this and just go Google it, because I know how students are. Life, liberty, and property was in the 5th and 14th, and especially if you start looking at liberty.
And law.
That's a very special word to Americans, the liberty word, in 5th and 14th. And I'll just let you run with that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you guys so much.
Good luck.
Well done. Good job.
Thank you.
Very nicely done.
Thank you.
Where have we met?
Freedom Foundation Valley Forge.